Mahamuye Suha Tata Muni Muni 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 Mahamuye Suha.
So, welcome to the class. This weekend we're doing what's called like the mind and its functions. It's not particularly it's scholastic, but it does give you an idea of how to look at yourself, how to deal with yourself, because one of the main goals of Buddhism is to be able to, let's say, understand yourself, release yourself of some of the misunderstandings you have, to arrive at a better place, both for yourself and for the relationships you have. So it's a process of growth. And so we're going to go through a couple of steps of which, they'll be, I think, quite helpful to give you an understanding. So basically, the way you understand your mind is that it's at three levels. It's at coarse, middling or subtle, and then very subtle, okay? And the example is from your hand, okay? And now, for example, I have one hand, and when I refer to it, but I can look at the palm of the hand or I can look at the back of the hand, so it depends on my perspective. But coming back to the three levels, the five fingers represent your five sense doors. That is your eye, ear, nose, tongue, body. And so those are the consciousnesses that access the outside world. Now, obviously your organs have to be in good condition or else you can't see or you can't hear, but providing you're a normal person, reasonably healthy, then your five sense doors, that is for gathering form, color, such, sound, smell, taste, and then your whole body is for sensation. Those are the five doorways for information to what's called the palm of your hand, which is basically called subtle. So those are coarse because they're very obvious. You hear a sound, you see a form, you see movement, you smell something, it's quite obvious. But for example, if I look at you, I have no idea what you're thinking about, which is subtle. You see what I mean? That's the idea is subtle is not so obvious. And so therefore, the palm of your hand is considered to be subtle, and it is basically all of the factors of who you are. So in a Buddhist perspective or Buddhist point of view, these five doors gather information, and then how you think, feel, respond, your attitude, all of the phenomena of who you are is in the palm of the hand. And then if you were to be quite peaceful, and I'll describe that in a while, you can go down to the base of your hand, which is your soul, or your Buddha nature, your soul, the most subtle level of consciousness. So this is how in Buddhism you look at yourself, that you have coarse consciousness, subtle, and then very subtle. Now, what's interesting is that this is 2,500 years old. I mean, this is not something that was just last week. And, yes, maybe modern science doesn't look at it quite that way, but when we get into some of the details, it's very interesting. They're really intelligent. I mean, for some guy sitting under, or some lady sitting under a tree and meditating, they're pretty smart. They did well. Why? Because if you do study a little bit of Buddhism, it's, intelligent. It's not a faith-based religion where you're told this is what you should believe, and that you have to question. I mean, Buddha Shakyamuni himself said, what I teach is like a piece of gold, but you need to go and test that. Is it really gold or is it something false? And if you do that personal testing, you will arrive at a conclusion which is yours. So you make your spiritual practice your own. So coming back to this, we're just sort of identifying how to look at yourself. So you have your 5 sense doors, which right now, 2 of them at least are functioning quite strongly. That is, visually you're looking at me, and 2, you're hearing me. Maybe you're aware of a sensation in your body, so maybe this is third state of consciousness is there. But then what's interesting is, how are you interpreting it? That's the palm of your hand. And that is established, I mean, that's psychology. I used to teach in Seattle to a group of psychologists. There's about 15 of them. And they're all high-end professional clinical psychologists. And we would have a great dialogue. We did it for like 3 years, once a month, get together. I would present a little bit of Buddhism. They would talk about clinical psychology. And we'd have a great conversation. So, sorry, it's a horrible thing in my pocket. I'm going to let me turn it off just so it doesn't do it anymore. I'm sorry. Normally you remember. Maybe whilst yourselves you can turn yours off too, okay? Okay, so there we go. Have you ever thought about it? Like, I mean, it's saying, let's say you're dying and you're thinking, you want to die, and maybe you're thinking of God or Jesus Christ, or you're thinking of the Buddha. It really doesn't matter, you're thinking of that, and then your phone goes ding ding. Completely distracts you. Anyway, coming back to the point. The analysis of your sense of self is to say, okay, well, I have these 5 coarse experiences, but all they do is label. I mean, I see a form, I can put a color to it, maybe I can even label it, but I don't put any other connotations to it. So for example, if I step outside and I see my car, first I just see car, then I see an object, I reckon, oh, it's car, and then we kick in my car. That's the palm of your hand, okay? So just to differentiate that there's corresponding. It's sort of interesting. The other day I was at a stoplight, and I thought, okay, well, I'm sitting here, okay, and I've got a visual field in front of me, and of course my mind is the red light. I'm waiting for the red light to turn, because in Mexico where I live, if it turns green, you got to go fast because the guy behind you is going to throw a horn. So I'm looking at it, and I went, well, what is that? So I made my perspective really grand, and I had everything there. I had the light, I had the street, I had cars across the road, I had everything. But consciousness is able to go, red light, stop. I experiment for yourself a little bit. It's just you're starting to touch a little bit conscious energy. Why? Because so much of us is our name, our social standing, the job we have, where we live, maybe our political party. I don't know, there's all sorts of stuff we put that at the forefront. But all those things change. Nothing's permanent. And so therefore, you want to come back and sort of be more conscious of who am I in a deeper way? I mean, yes, I have my beliefs and the things that I think are important, but the thing is, who am I within that? And where do I stand within that? So that's what meditation is a little bit. It's about getting in touch with yourself. Because if you are just very external, putting a lot of emphasis, for example, let's say every morning you have to drive to work and there's a lot of traffic on the road, and you tend to get angry every morning because somebody cuts you off, or there's just so much traffic and nobody lets you in, or whatever like that. That's your perspective. That's how you're creating your day and your moment right then. You could have a different mindset. That's not like you must have that mindset. Some people can sit there and be very peaceful, and other people get all upset and road rage. Anyway, so the way we interpret is really quite important, quite extremely important. So we have phenomena. We can focus in on, for example, just a street light or in some particular facet of what we're doing. Or if you ever actually, when you get older, you can't hear so well. And because what happens is you can't differentiate the one conversation you want to listen to from all the other noise. So interesting getting old, all this stuff doesn't work anymore. Anyway, so that's interesting, my consciousness of hearing can't isolate and hold that object well anymore. Whereas when I was younger, it could hold that, and even if there's a lot of noise, I could still catch the conversation, catch the meaning, all those details. So it's quite intriguing to look at just the data that's coming in, and then your ability to process, deal, think it through, and all of that it's actually called knowing. I mean, that's the way that it's defined as in the Tibetan language. And why? Because, for example, when I grew up, my father died when I was 6. That's rather traumatic. So I know myself as a child without a father. It's a funny way to phrase it, but like when I'm dealing with situations, I might have this sort of emotional hole in me, which is I didn't have daddy, And so I know myself. You could say it's not that you actually intellectually know, but the state of knowing that you has that, you could say, hole. Okay? Or maybe you've had a really good childhood, mom and dad just loved you and took care of you and they went through school and everything was pretty good. Okay, then you know yourself as, I'm pretty happy, I'm successful, I'm good. So that state of knowing includes all the things that happened to you as you grew up, your present state of being right now, how you're feeding yourself information, like what you're reading in the newspaper or TV or whatever it may be, then maybe what's going on with your family, what's going on in culture right now. All of those are states of knowing. That's a ghost. Anyway, well, maybe that was accentuating that. Just, yes. Okay, anyway, so you have the state of knowing. And the thing, though, is it really depends on your attitude about yourself. That's the most interesting thing, because if you have let's say a weak attitude or a very vulnerable attitude or low self-esteem due to a variety of factors, your whole experience of yourself is in that category. And so maybe you go to some therapist and they help you deal with your low self-esteem, or, for example, Buddhism, you meditate, get in touch with yourself, learn how to find a place of being peaceful with yourself. And when you're at peace with yourself, then you can look at these things and not be overwhelmed by them or drowned by them, by these phenomena that maybe you've had to experience. There's a great example that, if there's, let's say, a pile of excrement on the floor here, you might go, oh, how horrible, But if you're a gardener, you might say, wow, fertilizer. It's just perspective, And then, yes, you've got to mulch it. Yes, you've got to put it through a process to have it arrive into making beautiful flowers. But it has that potential. It's about attitude. So how do you look at your life? Poor me, I'm the victim, this bad thing happened, that bad thing happened. Or do you say, well, okay, I've got this shit and I'm going to mulch it. I'm going to turn it into my fertilizer. And what would that actually be? It would be a really deep empathy and compassion. So let's say you were brought up in a very traumatic family. Well, if you hear of somebody else with a traumatic family, you understand them. I mean, it's not you judge them, but your heart goes to them. I understand you. Anyway, so it's very interesting, the palm of your hand. Then the base of your hand, that's your soul, your Buddha nature. There's all sorts of names for it, but basically it's the final nature of who you are. There's nothing more than that. So if you were in a different religion, you could call it God. But in Buddhism, you're not like, it's not you and God. It's not a dualistic faith tradition. You would be at peace with God or one with God, or let's use the Buddhist term, at peace with the ultimate nature. There's nothing else after this. I've arrived at the final place. I've arrived at my home. This is it. And it doesn't have any forms, because that's coarse. It doesn't have any thoughts. It's non-conceptual, because you've gone much deeper than that. You're just experiencing consciousness, and a very refined consciousness. And I mean, all you need to do is watch some YouTube videos of near-death experiences, and they all talk about love and God and light and all these things, I personally think that just depends on your faith tradition, is what you bring to the moment of death, what you expect to have on the other side. So Buddhists would have Buddhist experiences, and Christian would maybe have angels or Jesus or whatever. That's perfectly okay. And Buddhism is much more open-minded, like, what does your deeper nature need in that moment? And sometimes people say, well, isn't Buddhism atheistic? No, it's not. Atheism is there's nothing. No, in Buddhism, there is an ultimate state of consciousness. It is love, it's all-knowing things, but it's just not the creator. That's the one thing that Buddhism says, is that, why would this ultimate being create us in suffering? It just doesn't seem to be logical. I mean, if you're ultimate, you can create the perfect toys. Why do you create broken toys, you know? So for Buddhism, what I'm trying to get to is there is definitely an ultimate state of consciousness. It is divine, it's the Buddha nature. You could say it's God consciousness or whatever you want. It is non-dual. You become one with that, and that is your personal liberation, state of epiphany, whatever you want to call it, okay? And you can arrive at that with your meditation. Okay, now let's come back to, we have coarse, subtle, and very subtle. Okay, the backside of your hand, because it's perspective, is coarse energy, subtle energy, and very subtle energy. So if you were to think of like electricity, your ability to see something is a conscious energy. Then how you interpret it and stuff, that's your mind, that's your state of knowing. But on the other side, there is just a conscious energy, and each one's unique. I mean, whether it's your nerves of your eye or the nerves of your ear or whatever, I mean, that's perfectly acceptable. But there is a unique consciousness. It's not like your eye can hear sound or the ear can see form. Those consciousnesses are unique to themselves, to their factors. Okay, so there's coarse, you could say electricity, maybe like 110, and then in the palm of your hands it's 220, and at the base of your hand, I don't know, maybe it's not like higher voltage, maybe it's a really subtle voltage, but the point is, if you look at this side, there's sense doors, sense of self with all of my dynamics, and then my Buddha nature, my soul. If you looked at that side, coarse energy, which then allows you to see, hear, smell, taste, such. Subtle energy, which allows your sense of self to animate itself, to feel excited about something or sad about something. It's just energy, you know. And then this is the point is, if you were to meditate, that means you shut down, don't get involved with the 5 sense doors. You do that by learning how to be at peace with yourself and such. So you do that, and then you can go to a subtler level of conscious experience. That's mindfulness. I mean, just go online and put in Google mindfulness, and you'll have all sorts of material on it. Like there's a couple benefits of mindfulness. Just you're more at peace with yourself. You'll start to understand that the thoughts you have aren't ultimate reality. Some of your thoughts are totally crazy, and you understand that, so you don't get caught by your normal neurotic mind. Or if feelings and such, you can understand how they arise. Maybe you understand the dynamic that made them happen from when your childhood or something, all sorts of interesting things. That's because you got peaceful with yourself. You weren't just skipping on the surface of yourself. You slowed down, went a little deeper into consciousness, and you got in touch with yourself. You started to understand some of the dynamics of who you are, why you act the way you do. So that's this level. But then if you really did good meditation, you really did say shut down the outside world, but not unconsciously. With your mindfulness attention, you could go down to subtler levels of consciousness to finally arrive at what we call clear light, whatever. It's your soul, it's your final nature, okay? So the mind in your hand this is the coarse, this is the 5 senses, your sense of self and its dynamics, and then your most subtle nature. And this side is, the energy on a coarse level, the energy on a subtler level, and then finally the very subtle, very smooth, quiet energy. And could be sometimes maybe you access it when you go to sleep at night, like you have this rather interesting experience as your mind shuts down the outside world, goes within, and maybe if you have faith or there's some circumstance, you arrive at some interesting place of consciousness. And oh wow, isn't this interesting? And for Buddhism, it's part of you. It's not something to be exaggerated or such. Anyway, so the opening part for tonight is this, that's how we would look at ourselves, to say, I have coarse consciousness, subtle consciousness, very subtle consciousness. And if you might think, well, where is the seat of my very subtle consciousness? Well, when you refer to yourself, do you say me? No, you say I feel this, I feel that. So it said that your soul, so to speak, rests in your heart, in the center of your chest. Although there's one contradiction to that. in Japan, they would say me, and they touch their nose. But they're weird. No, I'm joking. But generally speaking, you say, oh, I believe in this, or I think this is important, and you touch your heart, your chest. That's just a general thing. So although there's no, you might say, you like specifically, yes, you can find this spot, but mentally, emotionally, we do refer to our chest, our heart, this part when we talk about ourselves in a very sincere, real way. So part one of this evening is that we have then a little bit of a context of, okay, how am I looking at myself? I was just reviewing this a little bit earlier in the afternoon, and psychology just tends to put it all together. They don't really differentiate. And so that's where Buddhism, it has spent thousands of years meditating, so they've got a fair bit of a foundation for looking at how things happen, okay? And again, I mean, if you think of Buddha Shakyamuni, he was a crown prince, he was well educated, the meaning of his life was rather empty, he ran away from the palace, he went off looking for the meaning of life, he took some teachings and he went and started to meditate. He meditated for 6 years in an incredibly severe way. Finally, he gave up asceticism, like to really damage himself. He started eating a little bit and this and that. And then he had an epiphany. He had realization of the nature of reality. And how do we understand that? Well, his presentation can hold up to quantum mechanics. He's pretty smart. It was pretty genius, I mean, and how do you understand that? Just simple terms is, I mean, when they look at light is particles or it's a wave, okay? Well, they've now decided, well, if you're looking at it a certain way, you're going to see particles of light. And if you look at it a different way, it's a wavelength of light. Well, that's what Buddhism says. It says, it's just how you're looking at it. You are the creator of your experience. So if you don't have the right understanding, you will create some, what could be possibly slightly true experience or false experience, depends. Okay, so we've established step number one. Course, consciousness, 5 senses. All of your factors of your personality, the good things, the bad things, all the experiences you've had, all of that, even, your genetics, because that affects you, whether you've had diabetes or I don't know, whatever it might be, that can affect your emotions and feelings. There's that. And then if you were to go a little deeper than that you, let's say, don't get caught up with the superficial sort of fluctuations of thoughts and feelings, and you arrive to this very peaceful place. And then all religions talk about it. I mean, whether it's Christianity, Buddhism, Muslim, the Sufis, they all talk about when you have a good meditation, you arrive at this space of openness and peace. And then it comes down to how you interpret that. Oh, this is God, or it's Jesus Christ, or it's my most profound nature. That's your choice. I mean, it doesn't really matter as long as you're a good person. That's what counts the most. So that concludes sort of part one. And I can monologue a lot, but I'm going to open it up to just say, do you have a question or something that you didn't quite understand or something like that? And if there's no questions, I'll move to part number 2. But first off, it's open. Always have to wait a little bit till you get active again in your mind. So think about it in terms of, like, as I sit here, okay, I can see form, I can hear Jampa's voice, okay, that's coarse, but then how I'm interpreting that, how I understand that, the tone of his voice, the information in what he's saying, well, that's a little more subtle, that's more profound. And then if I was to have a state of meditation, I could go to maybe a deeper, more peaceful place, which we'll talk about in a sec. Yes?
The sense we have of inner and outer, is the outer from the 5, and then when you're doing like some raised meditation, it's like there is no inner or outer, it's all one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's because now you've applied the philosophy to what you're doing. So I'll give you the best example. We're talking about how do I exist? Okay, so I'm sitting in this room, how do I exist? Well, we'd think, well, I'm independent, I can get up and walk out of this room, I don't want to be here, fine, you can do that. But that's very, like you say, egocentric, or whatever, based on some personality. if you think about it right now, we're immersed in atmosphere. Like, we're like a fish in a fish tank. I mean, all completely touching me, all of my toes, between my toes, up my leg, my thighs, just I'm completely immersed like I was in water, except that the medium's very thin. And not only that, take a breath and that air comes inside my body, and then through the magic of just whatever it is to be a living being, it transfers to the blood and it goes to all the organs. I mean, my whole organism is breathing. So if you have that sort of a mindset, you don't have inner and outer. You have a more holistic idea of things. I am immersed in a universal ocean of interdependence. Me in this room, planet Earth, it's the afternoon because the Earth is spinning around the sun and it's got in this particular position, and then it's in this particular position because it's the summertime and it's getting hot. All these are dynamics and they're perfectly valid, causes and circumstances. So you have a more holistic sense about yourself. And in that, you don't then say, I'm a victim of bad things or something like that. You are the creator of your experience. So you say, may I be a benefit? So, I mean, for example, you're saying Avalokiteshvara meditation or Chenrezig, whatever. That's the meditation of love. So you appreciate you are in this ultimate nature, this unified nature of interdependence. And then you have compassion and love for them. May everybody have happiness and the cause of happiness. Or may they be free of suffering and the cause of suffering. You have that feeling in yourself, and that's how you're affecting the world around you. I mean, because for right now, you're sitting there, you're creating heat. She might feel the warmth coming from your body. You're breathing, so we don't know what the flavor of your breath is like. Anyway, so the thing is, you are affecting the world around you, but those are just physical. Our attitude is the real effect on the world around us. And that's where, again, Buddhism puts a lot of emphasis on that. Get in touch with yourself. You are the creator of your experience. Be a nice person. So, good question. Thank you. But that particular understanding, I think it's really nice, because as soon as you start to fragment a little bit and you start to get very polarized and you're upset about something, you take a breath and you go, no, okay, I'm in this interdependent situation. It's not much fun for me right now, but I don't need to just be reactive. I can have a different response to this. That's my hand. I remember when I was 20, I left Canada when I was actually 19, and I turned 20 in Europe, and then I arrived in India in November of just after my birthday of 1970. And then I met this Zen monk in Bodh Gaya, which is sort of like the Jerusalem of Buddhism. And he started to teach me meditation. And sort of the epiphany I had was I'm the creator of my life. It's not what my mom's been telling me, my dad's been telling me. Well, I didn't have a dad, okay. My mom telling me, or society around me is asking me, John Paul, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? I don't know, I'm 19 years old, come on. Anyway, but that was what I went like, wow, I'm the creator of my experience. And that was the doorway for me to then say, I want to understand this more. And so I actually became a monk. I was a monk for 14 years in India. Anyway, but so oneness it's not like we're all one. No. The nature of reality is we're all interdependent, and each one of us has our own sort of flow of causes and circumstances and stuff like that, depending on how we're thinking and feeling. But the thing is, we are in this holistic ocean of interdependence. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But all up on that, when I was thinking about what's outside and what's inside, definitely I feel like, okay, if I was to hit this ground with a hammer, I wouldn't feel it. If I hit my thumb, it would hurt. If I hurt when I hit the table, then I'd feel like that table was part of me. So that seems like a limiting view. If I hurt, then that's me. If that doesn't hurt, then it's not me.
Well, let's exercise. I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying exercise some intelligence, I don't hit my thumb with the hammer because they're going to hurt.
Right.
I have that intelligence because it's going to be interdependent. The hammer, my finger, and bang, that's right. Interdependent. So I understand, okay, I don't want that interdependence. So I can make intelligent decisions about how I'm living, how I'm eating food, how I'm exercising or not exercising, all of those are like the hammer hitting the thumb or not hitting the thumb. It's in my hand. I can make those decisions.
But defining myself as an I based on anything that causes me to hurt, that's me, that's an I.
Yeah, okay. Okay, good question, actually. We jumped a little bit ahead, but that's okay. So, the first off, okay, the worst word that ever existed when they first started translating Buddhism was ego. It just sucks, because why? Okay, well, would we say Buddha has a very nice ego? It just doesn't feel right, really, does it? I mean, like, ooh, ego. No. So the actual translation really is sense of self. So, you could say, I have a Jampa sense of self based on the factors and dynamics of how I was brought up and all the other things and my meditation, my studies, whatever. That's my sense of self. So I have a sense of self. It's a dynamic. I can put good stuff into my sense of self with thoughts and feelings, or I can put bad stuff in. My choice, if I'm intelligent, I won't, And so if we look at, for example, the Buddha, we would say the Buddha has an enlightened sense of self. And that's sort of like, it's not jarring comparing to say like the Buddha has a nice ego. I don't know, just think. So just in regards to translation words, ego is really bad, but it was an original one. They said egoless, egoless. No, you are empty of self-existence. So you could say your sense of self is empty of self-existence. So us sitting here right now, we are a dynamic of so many factors, how we were brought up, what part of America we were brought up in, how we were educated, what happened in our family, married, getting divorced, someone dying in my family, whatever, all of the factors, that's my sense of self is created by that. But how I look at those things, if I'm intelligent, is in my hand. And again, you could take the excrement on the floor. You could look at it and say, oh, my life is, full of excrement. Or you could say, oh, I have lots of fertilizer, something to make me a richer personality with real love and compassion and empathy. Okay? Anyway, so just the sense of self is a very good word to use, because when you're sitting there, depending on what happened today, how you drove here, what you've had for dinner or not had for dinner, that's your sense of self right now. And it's a valid thing, but you can change it because it's impermanent. It's going to change. So you can eat a nice, whatever, hamburger or something, feel better or whatever. Okay. So just one more question, if there's anything in that area. It's good. Yes.
It might not be in the direct area, but that's okay.
Sure.
So Buddha basically saw samsara when he reached enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess I'm trying to figure out what it is. He saw samsara, came back, and his whole goal was to help people learn the path to enlightenment.
To be better people.
Yeah, to be better people. But I guess my question would be, is it solely his goal to show them how to be better people so they can maybe be reborn into a state of a better life, like in some senses? Or would it be to help us escape samsara? And is escaping samsara just purely being a better person?
Good question. Okay. In spiritual practice, you have a couple of options. One is, I'm really unhappy. I don't like my existence. I want out of here. I want to go to heaven, and I want to be at peace. I want to be with God or Buddha, whatever. I want out. I want to get out. And that's called what's called the Hinayana or the Theravadan. It's like personal liberation. Okay, and that's valid. There's nothing wrong with that. Lots of people have those feelings. Someone who's had a big trauma, maybe a family member dying or a couple of people, and they're just devastated, and then they turn and they pray to God or whatever, and say, and they want solace for what they're experiencing. So they want to be free of that. So that is a spiritual practice. There's nothing wrong with it. Some people will do it. The other possibility, though, is that I'm not happy with how I messed life up. I make my wife or my husband unhappy. I'd like to do better than that. I'd like to be better with my children, to have them grow up better. You have that sort of those thoughts, because you're not thinking about yourself, you're thinking of your interdependence with others, and you're saying, well, I'd like to offer a better relationship. So I'm gonna meditate and get in touch with myself, slow things down, be more peaceful, that I have better capacity in talking to my son or my daughter, or dealing with my mother or my father when they have Alzheimer's or something, whatever. So I have that. So the first mindset is, I'm really unhappy, I want out of here, please God, take me away, or whatever, again, whatever definition you want. I mean, Buddhism says, I want personal freedom. Okay, the second one is, you're sitting there, you're meditating, you feel your interdependence, and actually that's tomorrow, we're gonna go into a big thing about this, actually, it'll be interesting for you. But the point would be is then, okay, well, I am interdependent, thank you to mom and dad, they gave me a body, may at least try to be nice to them, I mean, they're sentient beings, they have their own personality, they have their own dynamics, Maybe, for example, with me, my dad went through World War II, maybe he was traumatized a lot by that, or maybe some of you, your fathers and mothers went through Vietnam War, or Korea War, there's all sorts of dynamics could be there and things. So the point though is that from my point of view, well, thanks for mom and dad, they gave me a body. I'd like to try to at least do something nice for them. I mean, again, it's intelligence. It's not just I lay down and let them, abuse me or something. I try to be beneficial in an intelligent way. Then if you're in a family, if you have a son or a daughter, your goal is that they do well in life. You have that intention. And in fact, it's sort of interesting. I mean, what's the difference? Okay, that's called being a bodhisattva. That you are trying to be beneficial in the universe around you, rather than just, I want out. I want to escape all these problems and things. I'm so tired of them. It just never seems to fix themselves. I want out. And in this one it says, well, yes, I'd like to be free of my problems and issues, but hey, there's a bunch of other people here, and some of those people are really quite special, and I'd like to be beneficial in them. So I'm going to practice well and offer my practice in whatever way is most suitable to help them be good in their lives. Okay, so those are the two options. So Buddha Shakyamuni actually didn't evangelize. He didn't walk around beating a drum saying, get enlightenment, meditate, like that. He didn't do that. I mean, you have to, okay, first off, no television, no radio, no cell phones, no newspapers, nothing. And so you have these villages, and so he was a crown prince, so that means he had really long earlobes because he used to wear gold in his ear, but he was wearing rags now and stuff. And he was really well educated. He had presence. So when he walked into a village, he's mindful. He walks in and everyone would go like, whoa, who's this guy? He's pretty impressive. And he would then beg, nothing, he wouldn't say, feed me, I'm the Buddha. No, he'd go around and beg and he'd receive food and then he'd find a tree to sit under. I mean, this is like renounced. I mean, or just like not he's not in a big monastery or something. He's just wandering India. So he'd sit under a tree, eat his food, and then he'd meditate. And then the villagers would come in and say, well, hello, who are you? And then, I mean, depends on the circumstance. And Buddhism intelligence is really important. So, maybe it wouldn't be appropriate to say, I'm a crown prince and I've abandoned my palace and I'm looking for, this, right? Maybe that's not appropriate. Maybe you'd just say, I'd like to be in touch with myself and have a better meaning in my life. And then it'd go like, wow, yeah, I'd like that too, please. And then he would give teachings, meditation and things, which will be the next part of our thing, which I'm going to talk about philosophies, which is really interesting. You'll be surprised, okay? But we'll get there in a sec. Okay, that was singing. And then he just wandered around India. I think they sort of said he traveled in like a 100 square mile area of India. And then that went to Sri Lanka, to India, to Nepal, Tibet, Mongolia, China, Korea, Japan, Malaysia. I mean, just the whole Asia was Buddhist. And they didn't ever start wars. And Buddhism was the one religion that didn't go and to create war. There was King Ashoka was a pretty dynamic fellow, but what he would do is he had a huge army. He had a big army and he was actually conquering India. And then he met Buddhism and he sort of turned his heart. And so what he'd do is he'd walk his army to the edge of a country and say, I'm not going to come in and destroy you, but I'd like you to allow Buddhism to be part of your culture. I'm going to send you some teachers and things like that. And you have to pay me some tax. That. And then you go to the next kingdom and the next kingdom. And so at one point, King Ashoka had from Afghanistan all the way to Sri Lanka, all the way up to Bangladesh, and I mean, incredible empire. And it was a period of incredible peace because he promoted that. And they had actually, they said at crossroads throughout India, he set up medical centers that if somebody was sick, they could come and get medicine. And there's a Chinese monk who traveled in India at that time of Ashoka. And he talked about just how incredibly enlightened India was at that point. Then Ashoka died, and then he had a couple of sons, and they got petty and everything, and then everything got fragmented again. I mean, typical sort of stuff. But coming back to your question, so what's the thing is, you don't evangelize in Buddhism, you walk your path. You try to be a nice person, in touch with yourself and your emotions. So for example, let's say actually I'll tell you a story, it's a good story. Okay. So in Canada, I had a Dharma center for 18 years and stuff like that. And one day this lady came, she was an artist, and she said, oh, let's say, John, you have a meditation class every Sunday, I'd like to participate. And I said, sure. She said, because I'm an artist and my husband's an artist and we're very passionate and we get into these incredible fights and we throw dishes at each other and shout and thing like this. And I'm just really tired of that. I want to be peaceful. So I said, sure, okay. So she'd come every week. She took teaching, she meditated and stuff like that. So about 6 months later, one day, I'm in the house and then there's this sort of like door, and I open the door and it's her husband. And I'm going like, oh, okay. and he goes, thank you so much. My wife is such a better person. Anyway, so it was sort of okay, interesting. But that's an example of how you evangelize in Buddhism, that you walk your path. So for example, if you just try to be sincere and authentic in who you are, being in touch with your emotions, trying to deal well with them and stuff, maybe some family members come to you, maybe you have a sister or something, she comes like, sis, why are you better than me, And you can say, because I meditate, And then if she says, well, what's that? Then you can say, well, it's mindfulness. And then if she's, what's that? And then you can say, well, it's Buddhism, if you wanted to. It's your choice. You don't need to do that. But you could say, getting in touch with yourself, feeling more at peace with myself, feeling better about who I am, waking up in the morning with context about what's the meaning of my life, lots of interesting stuff. Okay, so do we have the handouts?
Yeah.
Now, there's only 15 of them, so if you're a couple, please just take one.
Also, if anyone has access to email, Terry, I wasn't able to scan it, and Terry emailed it to people that are on an email. But you guys maybe aren't.
So if you're a couple, please take one. If you're single, take one. Okay, so I'll start. This is part number 2. Part number 2 is the philosophy behind what's happening. So Buddha Shakyamuni had this big impact on India, and they all went like, wow, you're pretty incredible, you're a crown prince. I mean, think of it as like, who's it, Bill Gates' son abandoned this all and goes off and meditates in a monastery. You'd be like, whoa, that's interesting, isn't it? He has everything, Bill Gates' son, or whatever. Anyway, so that was sort of the level of that, and yet, he was dignified, well-educated, presence and things. So Buddha was really quite impressive. So as time passed, because he lived for 40 years after his enlightenment, so it wasn't like a one-shot deal where he gave a little bit of teachings and there was interpretations. He had 40 years to expound his philosophy, and it went through changes. Because initially he was in India, so that, he would talk about things within what Indians would understand and, at that time. And then as time passed, then, if there was somebody that was a little more thoughtful, he would maybe change it a little bit. So Buddhism's not like a dogmatic, this is the one thing. It's more a process of like, how do things work? So the big question is, what's the nature of reality? That's the thing. So you're meditating, you get in touch with yourself, you're getting peaceful. Maybe you can go to this experience of clear light in your meditation. So you're like, wow, this is like so nice, you know? I think it's that Blake, the poet Blake, he actually could experience clear light. He writes about it a little bit in his autobiography, whatever. And I know of some other people that did it. So you don't need to be Buddhist to arrive at that state of consciousness. But anyway, so coming back to these meditators. So they're all sitting under trees and they're meditating and they maybe arrive to this. And then when they reanimate from that very deep level of consciousness, and then they say, okay, well, how is this all working? So some basic tenets of Buddhism is that everything's changing. That's impermanence, like everything is in a process of change. Okay, so you open your eyes coming out of your meditation, the air temperature has changed a little bit, your body's changed a bit, maybe you're hungry, whatever. There's always a process of change. So that's something that you understand. It's a wisdom. Things aren't static. So these meditators would then say, okay, I'm meditating, things are always changing, which is actually, it's an incredible wisdom. The next time you're in a bad situation, let's say you're in a big traffic jam here in Boise, just remember this is impermanent. It'll change, I mean, of course you want that to change now because you want to get somewhere, but then it's like, okay, it's impermanent, okay, it's going to change, So anyway, you try to practice a little bit. So that's the first wisdom that these meditators had as they came out of their meditation and they said, okay, it's always changing. My personality is changing, maybe not dramatically, but it is. It's always in a process. For example, the woman in Canada, her husband said, whoa, you've changed, I mean, it took only 6 months of meditation and she, can get so angry and stuff. So there's all sorts of things. There's actually statistics now in the universities. They have whole departments about mindfulness. Nothing to do with Buddhism. They don't use meditation. They use mindfulness because they don't want to go on the Buddhist side of things. But it's just wonderful statistics about mindfulness. You'll have less stress, your immune system will improve, you'll have better memory. I won't go through all the details, just Google it and you can find out. But do use the word, either mindfulness or mindfulness is the better word. Okay, anyway, so these meditators, 2,500 years ago, sitting, I can feel all my body, tingling and vibrating, the blood circulating through me. I'm breathing. All of this is just in a process of change, but it's not arbitrary. As I'm sitting here, there's a continuity of cause and circumstance. Like, because I'm breathing, I'm giving my body new oxygen, or just I'm breathing, so then my organs and things can continue to live and things like that. So I am always in a process of change. That's my consciousness is cognizing that. And then it's not arbitrary change. It has a continuity of causes and circumstances. That's basically Newtonian physics, okay? We're going to talk about quantum a little later, but right now, these are the original meditators around Buddha Shakyamuni, intelligent men and women. So they think there and they say, okay, if I continue to breathe, I will stay alive, and in my body, the oxygen and the food I eat, and things like that. So there is a continuity of causes and circumstances. So then you'd say, okay, that's reality. So, because remember, we're asking, what's the nature of reality? Who created this? Like, what created this? What is it? It's a big question. All religions sort of wail away on that a little bit. So anyway, the meditator sat there and he said, well, okay, things are always changing, but if I have a good attitude, they'll change in a better direction. So that's nice. It's not arbitrary change. If I put good circumstances in, good things will come out. And even if it takes a little while, like maybe I'm sick and it takes 6 months to heal, well, if I do still put good things in, medicine and exercise, then I can heal. So, okay, there's a continuity of causes and circumstances. That's a wisdom. I understand a little bit about how the universe works. It's always changing. It's got a continuity of cause and circumstance. Now, that's sort of where the first two philosophies, on the piece of paper you have, it's called the Vaivasikas and the Swatantrikas. Now, what they then, and this is something that is really interesting. Like, when I was in India back in 1971, 72, 73, taking teachings from this Tibetan Lama, great Lama, all of my intelligence with the Buddhist path is due to him massively. But he said, you Westerners will not understand the nature of reality. I mean, it's called the voidness. Okay, but that's the word, like void. Okay, you will not understand this, it's too complicated. But what he didn't understand, and it took a little while for us to understand this, is that in Tibet, there was no public education. Maybe your aunt or uncle taught you how to read and write. That was it. Or you went to a monastery and then you learned how to read and write, whether it's a nunnery or a monastery, So there was no public education, one. There's no variety in that. You're basically taught how to do math and stuff and maybe how to be a good business person. So that Tibetan Lama, who's a very good person, looked at us with that mindset because that's what he'd experienced. He'd come out of Tibet, he was a refugee, he was asked by the Dalai Lama to teach, so that's what he did, and that's what he understood of us, okay? But, for example, all of us, maybe we don't quite know how to implement it, but we all know there's just vibrating oxygen atoms around us, oxygen, nitrogen. You studied a little bit, it's really interesting, like there's actually nitrogen in this air, And then temperature, and again, in the old philosophy of both India and a little bit of Tibet, the world was flat. In the middle was a mountain called Mount Meru, and then the sun and moon went around that. Now, they could do very good astrology or astronomy with that. They had accurate astronomy, but that was the way they did it. Flat Earth, Mount Meru, sun and moon go around it, okay? Although Buddha Shakyamuni did teach a round world in the Kalachakra Tantra. So it's not like he only taught that. But again, so their mindset was, okay, I'm in this universe, okay, it was created by causes and circumstances. And this is the one thing that is big in Buddhism. It says, if there was a first moment and it created us in suffering, it's our worst enemy. Why create us? If there's a creator that created the thing, why did they create us as broken toys? Now, I know religions try to give an answer to that, but in Buddhism, it's just sort of like, why did he make us broken? Like to play a game with us that we don't watch how to heal ourselves or something? And I'm not criticizing, I don't want to do that, but I'm just trying to say is, in a Buddhism, there is no first moment. So yes, there is the birth of this particular solar system, and it can have all the dynamics of modern science that the gases get together, and then there's, a spark, and then finally the sun, and then the planets, and that. Buddhism believes in that. They have something called kalpas, or aeons, and what it refers to is time spans that are absolutely humongous, thousands and thousands of years. And this is in Indian philosophy, that there's these cycles of there's the Big Bang, and this is in Hinduism and it's in Buddhism to some extent too. There's the Big Bang, the universe expands. So the Big Bang is Brahma, the god Brahma. The universe expanding is part of Brahma. Then it abiding, that is, it's hit a certain level, that's Vishnu, which is the nurturing and abiding of the universe. And then Shiva comes along and he destroys it, black hole, it all comes back into. I'm not making this up, this is straight out of Buddhism, okay, or straight out of Hinduism, okay? So there's this cycle of four things. Open like the space of the sky, Big Bang, growth, destruction, open space, like that. And we're talking thousands of years, not like, millions, billions of years, like that. So that's the philosophy in Buddhism about how the nature of the universe is. So there was no beginning, there was no first moment, because the big question is, why did you create us all broken? And then you're my worst enemy because you made me like this, So in Buddhism, that just seems illogical that a ultimate being would do that. So there is an ultimate being, enlightenment, male and female Buddhas, but they're not the creator. They worked hard on themselves, got enlightened, like Buddha Shakyamuni, and then finally, they got enlightened, and then like Buddha, 2,500 years ago, he wandered around India, and he affected the whole world, because he was charismatic, and he was intelligent, and his teachings were really good. You could say the same thing of Muhammad, you could say the same thing of Jesus Christ, they were very powerful, charismatic, spiritual beings. And in fact, I mean, you could, my name before I became a monk was Mark. So I was it Saint Mark, because Saint Mark says that the word of Jesus should love God only and love your neighbor more than you love yourself. I like that, that's Buddhism, but I would just interpret love God as the ultimate nature, not as some creator, but I'm just sharing you the ideas. So coming back to the point though, philosophy. So, okay, I'm sorry, big conversation. So the first two philosophies, if you look at them, these guys and girls that were meditating, and again, not in fancy laboratories, they were sitting under trees, they were just being mindful, present, and observing, okay? They said everything is changing, it has a continuity of causes and circumstances, and so the first two philosophies, it said, physically everything is just vibrating atoms. I'm serious, that's what they said. Everything is just a universe of vibrating atoms. It has integrity, it doesn't just fall apart, but it's just all the universe of vibrating atoms, okay? And in that vibrating atoms, there is the things that we mentioned, that things are always changing. There is a continuity of causes and circumstances. And if I don't understand that, I exaggerate things. I exaggerate my body, which is just a bunch of vibrating atoms. And I say, no, I'm self-existent. I'm unique. If I do that, then I causes my samsara. If I say, okay, I'm just a mass of vibrating atoms, I have ethics, I have virtue, may everybody have happiness the cause of happiness or whatever. That's their philosophy. That's where they would arrive. That was their ultimate truth, that their mind. So it said, the physical universe is nothing but vibrating atoms, and my mind is these little mind moments. So if I have this mind moment, the right understanding, it creates the next mind moment that has the right understanding, that it creates the next mind moment that has the right understanding. So once I have the right understanding in place, and I'm able to hold that, I free myself from taking rebirth. I liberate myself because I don't exaggerate, overemphasize the flow of atoms of my body or the flow of mind moments of my consciousness. Now it's a little bit nihilistic, but that was the philosophy of the first, could say 100 years of Buddhism. And both the Vaibhasika and the Saitantrika had it, and that's on your piece of paper. Okay, so a little later though, because Buddha gave a lot of teaching, he had 40 years of teaching. And so the idea basically is that a bunch of his students studied with him for maybe 10 or 15 years. They got this basic philosophy I just described, and they went off to other countries and they started to teach it, and Buddhism started to grow. But Buddha didn't stop teaching. He continued to teach. And then he came up with what's called the Yogacarya, or it's called the mind-only school. Now, that was a Mahayana school. That means that we are interdependent with the universe, may I be of benefit. So it's not just this sort of vibrating atoms and little mind moments which have no significance. Your mind holds on to that, saying it's just all vibration, and my mind is just little mind moments, and I'm going to hold that. And I go to this subtle level, there's a clear light, that's it, okay, I free myself. That's an understanding, but it's not the best one, but it's an understanding. The Mahayana teachings that Buddha taught maybe after 20, 30 years was then, okay, now they shifted a little bit. They still said, everything's changing. It's a standard truth. They said, it's a continuity of causes and circumstances. But and then they called it, so first off they said, my mind, the world is a reflection of my mind. That was their statement. So what's that mean? When you look at me, you don't see me, you see what you understand of me. You only see a reflection of what you think about me. And when I look at you, it's the same thing. And you, or if I look at this building, I only see what I understand. Whether I see it with competitiveness, or I see it with envy or whatever, I don't know, it's all sorts of funny things you can see, but what they did was they gave you ownership of your experience. The two first philosophies said, let go, it's all just vibrations and things, there's no continuity. Their example was, when a candle burns down and finishes the wax, where did the flame go? To the north, the south, the east, or the west? it just ceased to exist. So if your mind can hold, it's all just vibration and little mind moments, then where does your mind go? It's a little bit nihilistic, but that was their philosophy. So when we get to the Mahayana, the Yogacarya or mind-only school, Chittamantra was another name for it, they came along and they said, well, okay, yeah, it's always changing. Yeah, there's a continuity of cause and circumstances, but I'm only seeing what I understand. I don't see anything outside that. So the world's a reflection of my mind. Now, you might think then, well, what's that? But then the way that the world reflects for you is in your hand. You are the owner of your experience. So in your meditation, you open your eyes and you maybe see a battle or a war or some bad political situation or a famine or something like that. You know, you perceive it. You would have compassion and love. You try to be helpful, but you understand, whoa, this is the product of some causes and circumstances. It will change. I'm the owner of how I'm seeing this. May I be a benefit? So they were a Mahayana school. They worked for the benefit of others. Now, tomorrow, because we're going to, it's at 8:15, this is really juicy, you know. I mean, I don't want to go over this too fast. So tomorrow I'm going to go through it again a little bit, this particular philosophy, because it's really actually very interesting, you know. So just when you think about it, the world's a reflection of my mind, that doesn't mean that you have no control, that you are the creator, how those things appear in your mind. And so therefore have wisdom. Things are changing. There's a continuity of cause and circumstances. May I make the world a better place? I have intentionality, but that's my reflection of the world. That's how I see the world. Okay. Now, so that's the sort of what you call relative philosophy that they had. What was the ultimate experience? The ultimate experience is because it's just all my mind. When they shut down the 5 sense doors, when they calm down the sense of self that they have, and with a really good meditation, they arrived at this really deep experience of clear light. They would rest in it, and that was their nirvana, that was their peace. So in their meditation, they could hold that. But when they came out of their meditation, they'd say, I'm the owner of how I'm seeing things. I'd like the world to be a better place, because there's continuity of causes and circumstances and such, like that, okay? So there you go. Interesting, okay. So, there's one more philosophy out of this, which is even more juicy, but I don't want to go there just yet, because if I give you too much information, it just all gets intellectual. So first off, just any questions or commentaries? And if not, we'll meditate for a few minutes. See, yes, sorry, that's my Spanish.
The comment that the ocean of interdependence is such a wonderful description.
Yeah, I like it. And I like the idea that if I let my mind touch the atmosphere, I suddenly go, like, I'm immersed in this and I'm penetrated and I breathe. And I mean, and if I wanted to say, well, it goes up to a certain level above planet Earth and then it's going to dissipate, but, you know, I'm in this dynamic universal ocean of interdependence. Good. Yes. But then the important thing is, in that, be a nice person. Because you are interdependent. And even though you're not, you know, able to make big changes like, you know, Pope Francis or Dalai Lama or Desmond Tutu or something like that, still you are having an impact. So don't lose your faith or lose your conviction that I am beneficial. But just, you know, we're not quite as, don't have as much karma as Buddha Shakyamuni or as Dalai Lama or Desmond Tutu and things like that. So, good. So, Briganto's commentary. Okay, everything's impermanent. I'm sorry. No more opportunity. So when the window of opportunity is open, you better grab it, okay? Anyway, okay, so please take a comfortable posture. What is meditation? Well, I mean, there's lots of types of meditation, but basically it's getting in touch with yourself. You slow down your busy life, So you take a comfortable posture. And just allow yourself to be mindful of some of your breath, your inhalation, exhalation. No control, just okay. And breathing naturally. And you check up your shoulders and just relax them a little bit. Maybe your neck, your face, just relax a little bit. You are the creator of this experience, so invoke a little bit of peacefulness and your body will respond. And then try to have mindfulness of just the natural breathing, no special control. And with each moment of an inhalation, an exhalation, just I'm attentive to that. Nothing special. I'm just in this moment. That's something that's happening. It's a little difficult. We haven't practiced very much meditation. It says you only last for about 15 seconds and then you start thinking about something. But if you start to meditate regularly, you can have longer and longer periods of peace. But the main point is just, okay, body is reasonably comfortable. Maybe you've moved your head a little bit, your shoulders, just to make them more comfortable. Then shift to your breathing, but in this case, the movement of your chest. That's a good location. So just the rise and fall of your ribs and your chest cavity. No control, just observing. And when thoughts do come up, whether it's the noise of the air conditioning or car on the road or whatever it might be, just you can recognize it, saying, oh, okay, that's a car, or that's the air conditioning. But you don't think about it like, I wonder what brand of air conditioning they have, or I wonder if that was a Chevy or a Ford. That's distraction. Just hearing a noise is not distraction. It's part of your present state of mindfulness. So you try to be peaceful. And as you're focusing, being attentive to the natural flow of your breathing, because your attention is getting a little more fine, you might notice that you still have some tension and you can relax your shoulders a bit more. Or maybe you notice just some other tension in your body and you can say, okay, relax, please. That's the product of your sensitivity in your meditation. You're fine-tuning yourself to be more peaceful. So as we continue to meditate, see if you can sense a greater feeling of peace about yourself. The exercise is like exercise. You're strengthening your arms or your legs. In this case, you're strengthening your ability to be peaceful. So just check up and say, do I feel more peaceful? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But if you develop yourself over time, you will be able to invoke peace more and more easily. Get more in touch with yourself. Don't be so reactive, so brittle. More peaceful. And because you do appreciate you're interdependent with the universe around you, be helpful in whatever way is most suitable. That's a state of mindfulness with a nice feeling, compassion. And bring your awareness to your breathing. Close your meditation with some positive thoughts and feelings, which would be like, for my effort to coming here to the Vietnamese temple, my car, the time I took out of my life, my attention in the class. I dedicate all that to a more enlightened life. However, I understand that. And I make that my offering for the benefit of all. Please do the concluding prayers, John.
Due to this merit may we sin, attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.